furthermore, why would we then leave this dude out, this white colonial slave owner?
So, man on a carton, it's a Quaker. Quaker Oats. Not a slave owner. Quakers were actually abolitionists. They were very vocal against slavery, since their founder spoke out against it in 1600.
So this TikToker did an excellent job of dunking on somebody who was crying about cancel culture. But the specific complaint about this person crying about cancel culture and saying, oh, why aren't we canceling the Quaker Oats person? This person was white and lived a long time ago, so they must have been racist, right?
They actually petitioned Congress to abolish slavery. They're part of the reason the Civil War happened. You'd know that if critical race theory was a thing in schools and we actually decolonized the syllabus. Better yet, you could actually spend some time reading the books you're having your kid throw away. Stay mad, boo-boo.
Reveals a way that people think about the past that is very important to understand, because it is a misunderstanding that is incredibly dangerous and erases the history of countless people. I mean, think about it for a second. Why would that first person think that a Quaker would somehow be pro-slavery or be a slave owner? Well, because there's this line that is very often given to people that is basically, oh, we need to judge people by the standards of their time. And when they say that, what do they mean? Well, what they really mean is they think we should judge people by the standards of rich, white, slave-owning men at the time. Because the reality is, most of the people that lived on the North American continent during the colonial era were actually against slavery. I know this might be hard to imagine, but the people who were enslaved were against slavery. And the indigenous folks who had their land stolen were also, by an overwhelming majority, against slavery. It turns out that our system of colonial oppression was deeply unpopular. Even the very founding of the United States itself was not really a popular move. Once again, we need to understand that the creation of the United States itself was done to the benefit of wealthy slave owners in the United States. It was not done to the benefit of women in the United States, black people in the United States, or indigenous folks in the United States. In fact, one of the reasons why they launched the Revolutionary War in the US was because the king at that point had declared that the colonizers were not allowed to expand beyond the Appalachian Mountains. They were literally so outraged that they were not supposed to continue their genocide against indigenous folks that they fought a revolution for independence so that they could continue their genocide against indigenous folks. But of course, people don't understand this history because people are not taught this history. What is told in history books and what is told in countless schools across the United States of America is the idea that, oh, we should judge people by the standards of their time, and the standards of the time was that slavery existed. But the reality is, most people around the world, and especially in North America, were against slavery at that point in time. Everybody kind of realized and recognized that it was a very horrible institution. And the Quakers were one group of people who were very, very much deeply and strongly against the institution of slavery. But what makes this even more terrifying is the reality that Republicans are actively trying to ban any type of teaching of this reality. They are trying to ban teaching of the reality that there were abolitionists during the time of slavery. In fact, they're trying to make it so that you can't teach about diversity or inclusion or systemic racism or institutional racism or any avenue by which white supremacist institutions were created in the United States and are maintained to this very day. The simple reality that the United States was built on white supremacist ideals and was originally created by avowed white supremacists hides so much of our history from people to the point where most Americans basically have no understanding of what the United States even is. This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain on the Young Turks Twitch channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with my content.